Brett, thanks very much for sitting down with me today, or in this case, standing up in the glorious California air.
Oh, I love it.
Beautiful day.
Yeah, it is.
Brett, how long have you been working with wheat, and what was it that intrigued you so much about wheat specifically?
Let's see, I guess I've been in the wheat research area now for over 30 years, maybe 32 to be exact. Moved from North Carolina State University out of soybeans into wheat in the mid-'80s. I guess what most intrigues me, there would be many things that would intrigue me about wheat. I mean, the wheat history is just unbelievable. How hybridization occurred in nature in ways that might be considered biotech-ish today. I think it's just a fascinating story, and how our human civilization goes back to wheat. But maybe more in more contemporary terms, I think what intrigues me the most is what drives our breeding program in the Southern Great Plains, and that's this marriage of the beef industry with the wheat industry.
Right.
Very unique.
Right.
And there really is a direct correlation.
One supports the other.
Yeah.
Well, I guess they both support each other.
Yeah.
But the fact that we have beef availability that we have today in the United States really has a big thanks to wheat being used to grow stocker cattle. Those young cattle that come out of weaning, they've got to go somewhere, and there's a lot of wheat pasture in the Southern Great Plains.
Absolutely.
And it's a great intermediate point before going to the feedlots. It's a system that just doesn't exist anywhere else in the world.
Right. Right.
That's intriguing to me.
Absolutely. And the envy of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So, Brett, since heading up Oklahoma State University's Wheat Improvement Program, that was in 1998, your team has released, and I want to make sure I get this right, 20 hard red winter and hard white cultivars, including 4 of the top varieties planted in Oklahoma. So by my calculations, that's almost 5 million acres of wheat planted in 2016 by the OSU varieties annually. That's impressive, to say the least. For these contributions, NAPB recognized you as a 2016 Impact Award winner. Congratulations on that, by the way. A little belated, but congratulations. When we look at wheat breeding innovations over the years, there is so many tools that are available to breeders, and there's going to be so many more coming down the pipe. Can you talk a little bit about the impact that has had on your research and where that's going to take us?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind when it comes to breeding tools, we have not been able, of course, to utilize GM technology as in other crops. And to me, that's not a big deal because, when one technology is available, you just go find another. And the way genomics has taken off in wheat, even though it is a very complicated plant to work with genomically, there are so many opportunities there to explore. I think there's so much native variation in the species that we have right now. In fact, I think Dr. Dukovsky did a very good job of explaining that today. There's so much native variation yet to be uncovered. And it will take breeding tools like molecular breeding tools to bring those into the light, up on stage where breeding programs can use them. We have made a pretty dramatic shift in our focus back home, utilizing that technology, but bringing in people besides me to really make it happen. We tripled the number of molecular geneticists on the team, and everyone has a certain role to play. As we move forward from single gene-based molecular tools to broad-based genome-wide tools, genomic selection to be exact, I think that's a very exciting technology. We need more data capability. We need new brains in the program. So all that's happening, and it's not just happening in Oklahoma.
Right.
Wheat's a very vibrant crop.
Absolutely. Exciting stuff.
Yeah.
Exciting stuff. I know and forgive me because I'm not a plant breeder, Brett. One of your most recent successes, though, is this double stop CL Plus, right? And so help me out here. We've been able to breed in some herbicide resistance without any GM technology. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Exactly. This trait goes back to simple mutation work, which, mutations occur naturally anyway in wheat, but we'd like for them to occur a little bit more rapidly. And so through inducing mutations, a private company developed that trait. We have worked with, just like any other wheat breeding program in the country, have worked with that company to bring the trait in, but You know, the trait by itself doesn't really have any value.
Right.
It has to go into a package. And unfortunately, you mentioned double stop. There were steps along the way before that, and I won't go into all that detail, but believe me, it took a lot of work just to get the double stop, to get the package right. There's nothing wrong with the gene. The gene worked. Actually, it's 2 genes now. We've gone from 1 to 2. But I remember early on, and that would have been the late 1990s, we had problems with disease resistance. We had problems with, because of disease resistance, adaptation. And then we also had problems with quality. That's a triple whammy that really dragged the program down. And so I was just so thrilled to see with double stop, we got the package right.
Nice.
So right that I think farmers are willing to grow double stop, would be willing to grow double stop, even if it didn't have that trait.
Right.
So that tells me we're on the right path.
And so what does this mean for farmers now with having this available to them?
Oh, well, specifically in Oklahoma, it's dramatic because we have limited capabilities to bring in other crops. You know, we live in work in a very dry environment. To support summer crops, not very, we can in eastern Oklahoma, but in western Oklahoma, it's just not very practical. So we don't have the opportunity to rotate, which means we build up weed problems. Weeds become a big source of yield depression, quality problems in our crop. So using this trait allows us to keep that under control.
Right. So wheat has been treated as the, and don't reach across the table and punch me for this one, but it's been treated as the poor stepchild to corn and soybeans over the last number of years. Incorrectly so, right? These horrible things that people throw out about poverty grass, and this is changing now. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is changing. People are seeing the value. They're seeing the work that you folks like yourselves are doing. But there's a lot of stakeholders to keep happy down that value chain. How do you work to manage all of those stakeholders in the process?
Well, you kind of work from the back to the front, or maybe I should just turn that around. I mean, where we're really trying to make impact is on the grocery shelf.
Right.
You know, and what gets that food product to the grocery shelf, it's our millers and bakers. And so if we don't satisfy our millers and bakers, but only satisfy our farmers, then we really have not addressed the entire chain. And really, you know, we could talk about consumers, but I'm working under the assumption that if I can satisfy those millers and bakers, we will satisfy consumers and with the product that we deliver. So our emphasis has been on not quality, not yield, but quality yield. And they got to go together as, again, I will use that word again, package. And to take one out of the other and take one out of the context of the other would be worthless. Right. Just don't do it.
There's no value.
And that's how I keep things in line. And it is a little bit frustrating at times. You know, you see something that has value to the farmer, like disease resistance that's unusual, but does not have the value to the miller and baker. We simply cannot put that in the market. Right. It takes more work.
Absolutely.
We have the investments to do it, so let's do it.
Let's do it. Gotcha. So you also work in a teaching environment, and I'm curious, what are some of the key elements that you're trying to instill in the up-and-coming plant breeders in the OSU program?
Oh, yeah. You know, actually, I work a little bit less in teaching now than I used to.
Okay.
There has been so much pressure and demand placed on the breeding program, I now can't spend the time in the classroom that I once did. However, we utilize a lot of the talent on campus to help fuel our program with employees. So I get to work with a lot of undergraduates. And I think they see what it takes to operate a plant breeding program that way, and they get to see it firsthand because they're out there working with me. And they see me out in the field with them. It's not me sitting in an office somewhere calling shots from the fourth floor of Ag Hall. It's not like that. So they see me out there making decisions. They help me make those decisions as well. So it's a very practical experience for our students. But in terms of the classroom, getting away from the science a little bit, I try to instill, especially in our graduate students, a sense of appreciation for communication. I think maybe we're getting a little weak in that area, just from what I see among our graduate students. Not that, you know, I'm not being critical, but if there's an area that we could, you know, focus on a little bit more, it's communicating, written communication, especially for scientists.
Absolutely.
And I just try to make sure that any student that I interact with, either through a graduate committee or directly as my own student, that they leave the program knowing how to write.
Right, and I think that perhaps writing is really only the first tip of it, because the way that we're communicating in this day and age is on so many different channels and so many different opportunities for it. I stood up in a group yesterday of, we're at NAPB here in California, and I stood up and said to the group that this is a group that isn't overly well known for their expertise in communication. What thoughts do we have on how do we build that? And I think, to echo what your sentiment was, there was an absolute understanding that they had to focus on that more, because great ideas in your head aren't good enough anymore. Mm-hmm. They got to be great ideas that we can share with the world, and we're being asked to share them now, and that's why I think guys like you are being asked to stand up and share your story, because you can obviously tell it really well.
Exactly. Share the ideas with those who support our research, who invest in it, and they are farmers.
Yep.
Real farmers who invest lots of dollars in our research. We have to be able to communicate with them in a way that brings that investment on with no finite ending.
Exactly.
But I think it goes beyond the farmer too. We're having a situation now where I think some of our science is just totally miscommunicated to a public that unfortunately is becoming less and less connected to agriculture. It's just the way we're going.
It is.
And now is the time to get this right and work on it. And that's what I tell our students, the plant breeding students especially.
Yeah.
They're going to be on the front line.
Right.
And they need to be able to explain their science in a way that's acceptable, in a very warm way.
And
where we can
good word,
Yeah.
Warm way. Because if we stand up and talk from one scientist to another, it's not going to have the impact that we think it's going to.
What good is it to scare consumers?
Exactly. So lots of opportunity, lots of excitement. Obviously, you bring a lot of passion. I'm curious, and I'll just finish with, if you can pick one obstacle the plant breeding industry is facing right now that you think is the key thing that we need to be focused in on, what would you say it is, and why?
Oh boy. Well, we just touched on one, and that's still a very important obstacle, I think, is communicating our science in a way that's more acceptable, and to avoid some of the miscommunication, because I have spent a lot of time in the last 5 years since the anti-gluten movement really got started in September of 2011 when I go back to.
Right.
I spent a lot of time trying to undo some of that miscommunication. That's valuable time that can be spent elsewhere. But I guess another area where, I think in plant breeding, germplasm is so extremely important to it's the fuel that runs our programs. And so whatever we can do to preserve that germplasm, not only available to the developed world, but in the entire world, I think is important to our civilization in the long term. So I'm a little bit concerned about how some of our germplasm is getting locked up in ways that doesn't make it so widely available. And not to point fingers at one versus the other, I think we in the public sector can be just as kind of greedy, so to speak, with that germplasm as in the private sector. But I think overall, having more germplasm in the public sector in the long run will keep that germplasm available. That is something I think is absolutely key to plant breeding success, and also our future as civilization.
Nice. Very well said. I appreciate you taking the time for a chat today, Brett. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.